After our last video, my comment section was absolutely flooded with suggestions of how to use Blizzard's catch-up system in the alt-friendly Shadowlands. Let's take a look at it. My purpose here in this video is to levy some criticism or critique really at how the systems are developing in the Shadowlands, these three big systems that Blizzard brought in, and how that's reflected in the alt catch-up system. It would be an absolute lie to tell you that I wasn't absolutely terrified when I capped all these characters and knew that I had to set them up. Setting up the characters for just getting gear progression has been a running theme for the last couple of expansions, and it's got gradually worse, BFA being the worst example of it. And in the Shadowlands, Blizzard decided to try and make it easier. Now with that, what they've done is created a number of pathways that you can take, but they're not very obvious. And certainly if you're starting the Shadowlands now, or you're thinking about making a fresh alt, you may fall into some of the pitfalls that did not exist at the start of the expansion. We know this to be the case. In my last video, we talked about how many people were farming normal mode leveling dungeons to get gear. They were obviously following what would have been standard practice for any expansion pre-BFA. Pretty much. So for a long time, which would be to cap your character, then start jumping into some multiplayer content like normal dungeons, heroic dungeons, etc. All that would have made perfect sense from Kata, Mists of Pandaria, and then if it was Legion or even Mists of Pandaria, thrown in some dailies to start working on reputations, or in Legion case, getting some legendary items. But this time around, it's different. Blizzard knew that BFA was a big problem for people playing alts. I, notorious for playing every single character in this game, did not play anything beyond my two mains throughout BFA, and that was purely because the alt experience with gaining Azerite power was such a tedium, and then they added essences, etc, etc, etc. We all know the story by now. So when it came to the Shadowlands, I was literally mortified at what I thought I had to do. So I sat down and went through it. I knew I needed to get my soulbind sorted, which meant doing the campaign. I knew I needed to start grinding Torghast in order to get Soul Ash so I can actually get my legendaries. I knew that I then needed to find legendary recipes to get them sorted as well, and I needed to start working on my Conduit collection, and I also needed to start working on my Renown. These were all elements I wasn't looking forward to, as doing it on my main the first time around was a seriously long grind. I rescued so many souls from the maw. So many. Really collected a lot of anima on that hunter and that death knight, which I kept up to date as well. So we go back to our last video. When you last saw our friend Eyeliner here, Eyeliner was 183. This was done pretty quickly by going to the auction house and buying the 168 blues, which are ready available on every server and typically very cheap, although of course I'm on a high pop realm, so my prices tend to be lower and your mileage will vary extensively there. And then I jumped into Torghast to get my first stage of my legendary. After the nerfs to Torghast, it was very easy on my 180 character to in fact clear layer 8. I did pick up one BOE weapon during the leveling experience, and I bought another one very cheap. As I said, my prices are pretty cheap on my server to go along with that. But that was my character, and it was pretty fine. But in the comment section, surprise, how many people are like, why don't you do X? Why aren't you doing Y? You should do this. And this is what we want to talk about today. What has our journey been since then? I have put about 6 or 7 hours into this character since that last TDP. This character is now 203, which is odd. I was really surprised by how quickly I managed to get here, because I had read that the solo casual experience, which is exactly what I did here, was in this hard stuck zone between 200 and 210, and lo and behold, I have reached that point with just a few hours played. I was very surprised to reach that. So what was our journey? Because obviously some people don't know how to get here. The biggest tip people left for me was to go and do the campaign. So I sat down and was like, okay, I'll go and do the campaign. Now, here's where the criticism comes in, and I want to be clear on this. I am going to be a little harsh, but I really believe it's because we deserve better, and Blizzard should be doing better here. That's the only reason I'm leveling it. I consider it completely fair because, honestly, doing the campaign back-to-back showed just how egregious and obnoxious Blizzard's liberty-taking with our time actually was. If you did this at the launch, then the campaign came to you in drip feeding. Week by week, you would get a couple of extra quests until ultimately the campaign was finished. All in, though, the campaign equals about 5 to 6 hours. That's not a lot. And what surprised me is when you do it back to back, you realize just how much traveling and nothing else is involved with doing the campaign. I did the Ardenweald campaign here, and I honestly was so frustrated at Blizzard with how much they gave me quests that often had me traveling to either the other side of the Shadowlands, or in fact back to Azeroth, or in fact back to Battle for Azeroth, just to talk to somebody. So it could be an important NPC like Alexstrasza, and then just have me fly all the way back to Ardenweald. It was very, very frustrating because it highlighted once again two things. One, just how painfully easy the open world is in World of Warcraft, and it's really a disservice. Now, I know when I say that, a lot of people go, oh, that's because they've made it more accessible, that's to deal with the bads, that's to cater to the lowest common denominator. I don't actually really think that's true. I think Blizzard has really settled into a routine where they believe everybody who plays World of Warcraft, which is an MMO, which classically are time sinks, let's be honest here, is doing open world stuff solo while watching something else. And they have designed their content to be lengthy, slow, so that people can do their other stuff. I really truly believe that, and I could be wrong, and maybe everybody who plays World of Warcraft plays with one screen and is fully focused on what they're doing. And if so, that kind of sucks, because I could have tapped 1, 2, 3, 4 on my keyboard continuously with the screen turned off and successfully completed every single quest along in the campaign. It was actually so bad to the point that when bosses appeared, I didn't have time to actually turn the recording on by the time they would pretty much be dead. That's how weak and fragile they were. And Blizzard tried, and I think this was their attempt to give the impression or the illusion of adding depth or adding some difficulty to this, is that they would do some strange things. Like, one is traveling to kind of picturesque areas, like when we see Alexstrasza, or when we go and visit some of the old gods in Nazmir. I'll go and see Bwan Samdi, who's a fan favorite, things like that. But also by just throwing in random elites into a lot of the combat areas. Combat was entirely either fill the bar or transform into an NPC that can't possibly lose and only has 1 or 2 buttons, which again is just not satisfying gameplay. It's nothing to do with your character. And or it was kill 8 things while picking up 4 things, which is essentially just fill the bar. As you know, if you've done a fill the bar quest in World of Warcraft, you can kill things or click things in order to fill that bar up. Sometimes they present that as fill the bar, and sometimes they present that as just kill the things and click the things. They're the same quest, essentially. So if it wasn't that, there was nothing else to it. That was the entirety of the combat, which means there's really been no innovation here since the Burning Crusade. The idea of the bombing run was the most interesting thing that I did in the Ardenweald questline. I managed to take over Lady Moonbury, and we bombed an area and committed genocide. That was something that was introduced in the Burning Crusade. As many of you know, or are about to step foot into Outland for the first time for a proper time, that's when bombing runs came in. They've really not innovated since that point on this quest design, which is a little scary when you see it in such a heightened format as you do as a main story campaign. I certainly remember the Legion campaign more fondly, but that might be rose-tinted goggles. It's hard for me to say. Going through this then, these elites. So what are the elites? Well, elites really are an idea of padding out quest length. That's what it felt like to me. And that's because you would often find, while doing the combat areas, certainly in the campaign, 6 or 7 very low health, very easy enemies that you could AoE down very simply, and then in the middle of them there would be one guy who would have upwards of 10 to 12 times the HP of these smaller enemies, yet do no more damage or to have any other mechanics. They're simply there to drag out the quest time, because otherwise you would be done in seconds as a point of arriving, because the enemies simply just have no HP. And this is in blues. This isn't a case of being overgeared. Often I dismiss this because classically my characters are very well geared, and obviously the open world is not going to be particularly difficult for somebody who's a mythic raider. However, this time around I am in blues. And it was, yes, while it is a demon hunter, which is pretty good solo, other classes are not too far behind, despite the disparity some people like to make it out to be. They're not too bad. Every class can heal, every class can do pretty well, or has escape routes if they overpull, which is likely the only way you're going to die on these quests, is by pulling absolutely everything, even unnecessary things, and trying to AoE all to death in your low-geared characters. I point this out because, again, it's a disservice. What's the most common thing I hear from casual players is there's just nothing for me to do. Nothing for me to sink my teeth into. Nothing for me to engage in. It's often why the Mage Tower is brought up, so is because players were able to sit down and actually put up a fight on their terms and figure out how to go. Unfortunately, at this point, World of Warcraft seems to have nothing of that sort outside of higher tier Mythic Plus, higher tier rating, and higher tier PvP, which is also a point where I do consider a character done with the casual side of things, such as this one. It might only be 203, but this is the point where if I want to progress the gearing of this character, it's going to be either through rating, Mythic Plus, and certainly higher Mythic Plus now, and higher end PvP. That's really where, outside of getting lucky, that's really where this character's got progress is going to lie at this point. It's going to be weekly vault and things like that. In terms of open world stuff, a lucky world boss drop, maybe, but that's about it. This character is kind of done with everything in the open world, and quite sad that it only took me a few hours. Moving on then. What to do next? So I did the entire campaign, and I was unclear as to just how powerful this was. The campaign, as I said, took me a few hours, and I found exactly what many of you have found, is that for very, very little amount of anima, in fact, I had to do one world quest, and I mean that, one extra world quest, in order to gain the anima to upgrade all my gear at the moment I finished the campaign to 190, which then begs the question as to why anyone on Earth would ever bother doing normal mode or heroic dungeons. This gives you everything except rings and trinkets. It even gives you a weapon at the end of it, and of course there are many world quests out there now that are rewarding like 190 and 200 weapons that you have to wait for them to pop up, but once they do pop up they are available. So it really bothered me that you could do this, because I was already way up to where most of the player base seems to be stuck, and all I'd done is spend a few hours doing the campaign. This kind of brings up Renown, so we should remember what Renown is. Renown's entire system is designed to just hamstring players who play from the start. That sounds really dark, but it's true. That's all it's for. As it's well documented now, and even reiterated in this video, there's not a lot of content that's actually locked behind Renown. It's acquiring your soulbinds, it's the campaign, and it's item level increases, which made no sense at the time. I would consider at this point Renown to be a failure. It is not the same, as I'm sure some of you are about ready to point out, is it's to stop people getting an unfair advantage, which is true when it's things like artifact power and anima, which are a continuous power increase. That's not what is locked behind Renown, unfortunately. It is just the campaign, it is the soulbind unlocks, and its item level rewards out in the open world and in PvP. Which means there is absolutely zero reason to time gate it, other than the fact that they probably really want you to stay subscribed for a little bit longer. Renown is a very obnoxious system, and it could do with either being rolled into Soul Ash or into Torghast or something, combining those systems together, rather than having this really... Because the only people Renown punishes are the people who enjoy your game. That's how I feel about it. Preventing me from getting my 3 soulbinds, which is in reality like 5 to 6 hours worth of gameplay, which is not something that somebody who... I'm fully on board, I want to be clear. I am fully on board in thinking it is totally unfair that somebody who doesn't work and plays all day every day gets a continuous power advantage over a guy who works, or who has a family life or anything like that, and has to come home and only has a few hours to play. I agree, that's absolute bullshit and it shouldn't be the case. This is not that. This is not that at all. Only having several hours worth of gameplay locked behind Renown that took months to unlock is really bullshit. And the same goes for the conduit energy as well, which I think we can all agree serves zero purpose to anybody at this point, and is almost still, as I mentioned in the beta, a stubborn point for Blizzard because they want it to exist for some reason and are a little bit too stubborn to walk it back. I bring this up because Renown wasn't a problem for me. Renown never stopped me progressing. How do you get Renown then? And this was another great tip from the community. Well, LFR, actually. I thought people were teasing me. They were like, you should jump into LFR, because ordinarily I wouldn't touch LFR with a pole. Excuse me. But people are like, no, really, go and do LFR. Every single boss in LFR can reward Renown. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I jumped into Denathrius, killed it in 5 minutes, got Renown, got a weapon. Actually, I know I'm lucky. And then jumped into the other bosses, and I completed the LFR in probably less than an hour, interestingly enough. There's not that much when it's broken up into wings in Castle Nathria, and of course, every time when the LFR finished, it instantly put me into the next one. So I did do a full run of LFR. I got tons of Renown, and with that Renown, I was then able to completely do the campaign without ever being stuck. I never had the point where it's like, you need to go and get more. I did turn in the anima quest one time, because I naturally picked it up by killing the world boss, etc. And I did the Maw of Souls Collect 5 one time. Why? I was in the Maw to do Torghast, so I thought I'll just jump and grab them because it takes 2 minutes. That's the only extra stuff I did in order to get Renown. I did no callings at all, but we'll come back to the world questing and stuff later. As many of you who probably played in Legion, as I mentioned before, probably thought that when I cap, I should go and do my emissary quests, although they're called callings now. No. Go do your campaign and get a load of 190 gear very, very cheap. It's a really good idea to do that by upgrading those characters, because you just leap past so much stuff so very, very quickly that it's well worth doing that. So what was my next stop? Well, the game really wanted me to invest more time in Torghast. Kept giving me quests to go back there, and I did want to upgrade my legendary to its next level because it is weekly capped in order to get that Soul Ash, and it really reiterated once again how sad and tragic Torghast is now. A system that was so hopeful, and I still believe in Torghast. I want to be clear on that. I still absolutely believe in Torghast. It would take so little to make that system amazing, and Blizzard could straight up rip and copy the most famous roguelike games out there. We just had a brand new Binding of Isaac expansion, like the 15th expansion to that game, which is still being world renowned as being amazing. This is all out there. It's all available as exactly how to make this system work. Unfortunately, as Torghast stands right now, it is Torghast. I fully agree. I did not enjoy any of the runs. The builds were just not that interesting. I have done many Demon Hunter runs while I was on the alpha and the beta for Torghast. They were more fun. This time, not so much. The builds are identical. Even doing only 6 floors, my builds basically ended up exactly the same because there's just not that variety of powers. And also after the nerfing, it just wasn't that hard. I did Torghast level 8s very, very easily on stream with a 180 character. Honestly, after doing layer 8 in the original version, I expected it to be much harder, but it has been nerfed very heavily. So I walked through it, and then going back in after getting a few campaign upgrades, I smashed it to pieces, once again reiterating that this gameplay is designed to be done while watching something else, which is exactly what I did. I did challenge myself to do some open world parts of the campaign because it was really frustrating me without having something on. So I was watching some Deep Space Nine on Netflix while this was happening, so I turned it off and tried to focus just on the game, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't manage more than 10 minutes. I was just too bored. And it's really sad. It's really, really sad that that's the case of things, but there's just nothing for me to engage my brain with when playing this content. So back to Torghast I went, managed to smash through that, got my next legendary upgrade. Then I considered what to do next, and that's when it dawned on me. We're here. I'm 203, I'm good. The next thing to do is to do Mythic Plus. As a side here, I will point out that the most interesting thing I did in this setting up process, the campaign is complete. I have all my soulbinds. I have a reasonable Lego that can be upgraded again next week, and I have a reasonable set of gear to jump into whatever I want to do. As I said, this is how I can consider a character ready or done, set up in terms of the process. The most interesting thing I did was actually a Mythic Plus 7. We did a Mythic Plus 7 when I was 180 geared as a tank. We had a 171 healer, and we two-chested it. We did have a very well-geared Shadow Priest in there, I will point that out, but we would have timed it anyway. The group was absolutely fine. But going through there, it became... A really sad moment for me was that I did get a piece of loot out of that. I got a nice pair of legs that I was very happy with because I earned it. We had a very intense run. We're low geared, working through plus 7. It was really extremely fun experience. It was the most fun I had throughout all this setup process. And I replaced it by tagging a world boss that had 5% HP by walking up and just clicking it, and got an item that was 25 item levels ahead. This is where I talk about the cannibalizing of systems. I'm not sure what happened, and obviously the end of Shadowlands development was extremely rushed. I don't know what Blizzard were thinking of with World Quest 2.0, because as far as I can tell, unless you are really, really interested in doing the Sanctum, then the World Quest system is entirely dead. I found no reason to go and do it whatsoever. Callings made no sense unless I wanted to do some reputation farming or hope for a conduit or something like that. But I just don't get the World Quest system as it stands right now. It feels like several of the systems I've mentioned here, they're just underdeveloped. That's why I'm not angry at Blizzard about it. I just want to put the critique out there that it's very noticeable. It's very, very noticeable when you play through this content in a rush because of the catch-up systems, just how many of them are underdeveloped. Torghast is not fun. The campaign, when you do it back-to-back, is really quite sad in terms of how difficult or lack of depth, or compared to even a basic RPG questline, it's very weak. The soulbind system still makes no sense to me after playing through it. It just doesn't ring true as a good system. But what I can say this, and this is the big positive I'll take away from this, is it's extraordinarily quick to get your character set up. And I would leave you on that positive for anybody thinking about returning to Shadowlands or making an alt. It's insanely quick to get all this stuff out of the way. The problem is, it's not fun. And I know fun is subjective, and I know there are people who will love the current version of Torghast, will have adored the campaign, and will play that campaign multiple times. There are always people who adore that. I can only give you my POV and my experience here. Is we can do better. This should be a fun time. Unlocking my soulbinds should be interesting. Completing my story should be interesting. This is, after all, a big, meaningful choice. Not to be a memer, but it is. This is the meaningful choice that Blizzard promised, and I should be very engaged with what's happening here. I'm not. You have me sat on a flight point for so much, and if I'm not doing that, I'm riding from point to point. I do a very simple, basic quest that I would expect to see in the Burning Crusade at best, which is over a decade ago now. And then you have me just flying back again. It's just not engaging. My soulbinds don't do anything alongside this story. They're not interesting. They're not taking part. It's nice to see Bwan Samdi again, but then again, it's a very tacked-on piece, and it feels tacked on. It feels like, oh, you guys like Bwan Samdi, here's Bwan Samdi. That's what it feels like. And Torghast and all that feels the same thing. The Renown system is very clearly obnoxious, and I don't think it serves anybody any basis of fun. I would hardly say it was fun. All right, guys? So not to leave you in a downer, but I think the good thing is it doesn't take too long, and you can get through it, and then your character, like this one, is all set to gear up. So thank you very much for watching. I'll see you again. Bye-bye.